in. Thanks for watching us from Northern Ireland. Welcome to the PCL Live. So I was commenting on the newsletter that I wrote a couple of days ago about what happens when we avoid difficult conversations, especially as leaders. And there was one particular comment that I really liked, and it was the woman, the commenter said, companies and at times leaders themselves tend to rely too heavily on learning on the job. And this happens a lot in small companies where there's no official training program. And I'm not saying it's all bad because we all have to start there. But what happens in doing so, they wrote, they often overlook the need to actively develop leaders in critical areas. I wrote a post a few weeks ago where I talked about, promoting a technical person, promoting one of your best employees because they were really good in what they did, but they're not necessarily leadership material. And this is a mistake many small companies make because we have a great employee and we think, wow, we'd like to see them multiplied. So let's put them into leadership. We put them into leadership without the proper training. And so what this commenter was saying was that leaders who do this often overlook the need to actively develop the people who they just promoted. This includes how to give effective feedback. So giving effective feedback is one of the most difficult things I have experienced in my coaching practice with leaders. I don't care how seasoned the leaders are, when they have to give that tough feedback, especially to people and team members who are really valuable, it becomes a real challenge. But it's an art that we have to learn. And so another commenter said that she recently shared on a podcast that difficult conversations are often avoided because we're bracing for an anticipated or imagined outcome. But the truth is we have very little control over how someone will respond. I agree in part because we do have a little bit of control over how someone will respond, and it's all in our approach. So something that I learned from someone else, a podcaster I follow by the name of Craig Groeschel, his leadership podcast is very good. And there's one tweak that I tell my clients when they have to have these difficult conversations or critical conversations to eliminate the word difficult and eliminate the word critical and replace that word with developmental. So just a one tweak by saying to your employee or your team member, whoever you have to speak with, especially when they're your direct report, say, hey, Patrice, Patience, I'm just using you, Patience, today. Hey, Patience, I want to sit down with you. We want to have a developmental conversation. Now, it's different from me saying, hey, Patience, I want to have a critical conversation or I want to have a difficult conversation. Right away, when I say the word difficult or critical conversations, you are gearing for it for tension. You are embracing, you're on the offensive as the person who will be receiving the feedback. But if we tweak and we say, I want to have a developmental conversation, the idea is that we're going to both come out of that conversation with a win-win situation. So that's one of the first thing I would encourage and the listener here today to just change that one word, difficult to developmental. So a lot of times leaders avoid the feedback, giving the feedback because of their own discomfort. Like I said, I think at the heart of it, everyone wants to be liked. Everyone wants to feel like they're, open, empathetic. And when you have to give a difficult or a developmental talk, it's going to create some tension. So I'm a John Maxwell certified coach. And one of the things that I learned through one of his programs is every conversation that you have, you're either making a deposit into someone's life or a withdrawal. And so what I advise the people, the leaders that I coach is this: make a lot of deposits just in general, because as a leader, you're going to have to make withdrawals. A withdrawal initially is a challenging conversation. That's going to take away something from that camaraderie, because now we're talking about something that's maybe a performance issue. It could be a punctuality issue. It could be a communication issue. So it's going to create some tension. But if there is enough, if you have made enough deposits into your employees or into your team member or into your direct reports, then you are able to make those types of withdrawals. If you are a leader, however, who's always finding something to criticize or to challenge, then yes, that's going to be a very difficult conversation. Hi, Sanaa, thank you for being here. And please, if you have questions, guys, please go ahead and put them in the comments. So yes, so that's something that I just want to remind leaders that it's okay to have those tough conversations, but also make sure you're having empowering conversations as well. Always give that affirming feedback. Everyone wants to be affirmed. So the tools for you guys as leaders or managers is reframing. First of all, you as the leader, when you reframe it in your head that I'm going to speak with Sanaa today, and I really think she's a great employee. She's great at what she does, but in this one area, she tends to miss deadlines, or in this one area, she tends to be her communication is just not great. In this one area, I have a problem and I have to address it. Because what happens when it goes unaddressed is that your great employee, Sanaa, keeps making these types of mistakes, which ultimately affects the company, ultimately affects the team. It's going to ultimately affect someone. So you have to have a difficult conversation. But if you reframe it, you as the leader, before you have the conversation that I am going to have a developmental talk with Sanaa, then, and you tell that to Sanaa, then it's a different feeling going in. It's different for you. Your energy as the leader, the energy that's having this conversation will be a lot more positive going in. If you the leader, feel like I'm going to have a difficult conversation, well, going into the conversation, you are also tensed up, and that energy around you is going to, be felt by the person who you are trying to coach. Remember this: honesty is kindness. I've seen situations where, a leader or a manager, they're having an issue with a direct report, and they are not addressing it with the direct report, but they're addressing it with other people on the team. That is not kind. Okay. And it really says a lot about that leader and not that about the person, because the person may have a blind spot. They may not even know that they're having an issue. And so honesty is kindness. So if you're in senior leadership, if you're in management, I'm just going to encourage you to find the courage to have these developmental talks. When you enter this space, whether it's on Zoom, if a lot of us are in remote environments now, or if you're in a brick and mortar space, your attitude is not to win an argument. It is to state your case without any personal jabs, stick to the issues, and seek to have a solution. And always think win-win. Hi, Alejandra. Welcome to the talk as well. Thanks for being here. So yes, shift from feeling like I need to win this argument because this person is creating an issue. Instead, say this is a teammate and their growth is going to be very good for our organization. So in terms of delivery of the conversation, of the difficult or the developmental conversation, remember now, we're saying a difficult conversation here for this live, but in practice, I want you as a leader to replace the word difficult to developmental, right? So when you're going to have this developmental conversation, it should not be a lecture. It should not be a lecture. So check your attitude. Remember, win-win. Win-win is the idea here. Let's see, we have a question here. How do you handle difficult conversations with a co-leader or when they're passive-aggressive or outright hostile and upper management C-suite is not offering any help? Great question. Well, it's hard to have a difficult conversation as it is with your direct report. Co-leaders are even more difficult than that because that's your peer group. And if they're passive aggressive and outright hostile, obviously dealing with their personality. But I think the concept that I mentioned before is that bodes for this too. Think win-win. Even though the person may be hostile or aggressive or passive aggressive, your approach is, I am in here to win. I'm not going to lecture, no personal jabs. I'm not going to talk about their personality. I'm not going to talk about them being hostile. I'm just going to talk about the issue. Always stick to the issue and never the person or their personality. I think that's where people get it wrong. So, for example, instead of saying, you're always doing something, or you're always missing a deadline, or you're frame it as, okay, is there something I need to know? Do you need more help? Do you need more resources? What is your perspective on this and that? For the difficult co-leader, for example, you guys may not see eye to eye on something. So you could ask the question, it's like, what is your perspective on this matter? When you say it that way, it's very disarming. And so you, as the person having the developmental conversation or the one initiating it, you do have a lot of control over how you show up, even with a difficult co-leader. So great question. It still remains the same. Think win-win, no personal attacks, stick with the issues, ask questions, invite dialogue. When it's a direct report, even with a direct report, you can still frame your conversation as, how can I help you get over this? Or how can I help you make this leap? Or how can I help you? This sounds a lot more developmental than you're always late, you're always missing your task. That just creates a lot of tension. So, hey, ask questions as you guys wish. I love the questions for sure. So one question I get asked a lot by executives is, what do I do if the employee gets defensive or starts crying? Similar to what Wayne asked, they're hostile or passive aggressive. In this case, you're the leader, you're having a developmental talk, and the employee gets defensive or starts to cry. You stop the conversation. Are you okay? What do you want to discuss? What's bothering you in that moment? But you stop the developmental talk. Now remember, it's developmental because they need to change their behavior. So you're not going to compromise on that. But if they're crying or they're defensive, they're not hearing. So you want to stop the conversation at that point, and you want to say, what is causing this reaction? What am I not seeing? Help me to understand what you're seeing. Remember, your attitude is win-win. You're not there to cause an argument. You're not there to point fingers. You're there to develop that person, that employee, so that they can continue to be an asset to your organization and to the rest of your team. If there's any other questions, I'd love to answer those for you. We have a few more minutes on this call. Patience, Sana, Alejandra, you guys have a question? I'd love to answer that for you. When you're starting the conversation, by the way, the developmental conversation, some leaders don't know how to start it, right? So, as I mentioned, you mentioned the word developmental, but you also need to give your intent. So you could say something like, my intent with this conversation is to support your growth. But let's say they were missing deadlines, right? And they're critical deadlines, and they have not been communicating that with you, right? So a lot of times the issues with employees is that um, they don't communicate, right? So they have a deadline, they were missing the deadline, but they didn't tell you that they're missing the deadline. So one of the developmental strategies is to let them know, if you can't meet a deadline, I need to be told before the actual deadline. But you could say something like this: my intent with this conversation is to support your growth, but the impact of recent missed deadlines is putting the team in a bind. So now it's you're saying you're missing the deadlines, but you're saying it in a bigger frame, that the impact on the team or the impact on the organization is putting the team in a bind. Help me understand what's going on. Is it a resource issue? Because sometimes when you have these truly open win-win conversations, you will get to find out that sometimes there are some real personal challenges happening in someone's life that you wouldn't be privy to. It's not an excuse, but it's a bridge. It's a bridge where you as a leader could provide some solutions to whatever is happening. All right. So any questions? I'd love to take a couple more questions from the audience. And if you're in team replay, if you're watching this after 1:30 Eastern, you're going to be team replay. You could just do hashtag team replay, and I will answer the questions from the feed or in the feed. So remember, as a leader, okay, let's see. How can leaders address difficult conversations in a way that protects both the performance and the dignity of the people involved? Very good question, Alejandra. Because the reason why leaders avoid the conversation is because they risk the having the performance of the person dropped, right? Or they get resentful, or all of a sudden there's an additional tension that wasn't there before because now I've had a difficult conversation with you. And I think, and this is why there's so much avoidance. But again, I think a lot of the onus on this is on the leader, the person bringing the conversation. You as a leader need to have the right attitude. I always say this: look, you should love your employees, okay? You should literally love your employees. And if you love someone, you're not trying to hurt them. If you have an underperforming employee, this is my philosophy anyway, before it gets to that difficult conversation, if they're underperforming, that should be identified by management or by yourself, and questions asked along the way or training given, etc. Someone said in one of those comments on one of the other posts, leaders sometimes promote people and give them no training and expect them to just be a leader overnight. It's a different set of skills required when you are a leader compared to when you are an exceptional employee. And so I have to say the responsibility on that failure is on the leader. So you as the leader, I think, John Maxwell said, everything rises and falls on the leader. I do agree with that, because performance drift to the point where it's really bad meant that someone wasn't watching the progression of that. But to your question though, Alejandra, is that leader who's having that conversation must do so respectfully. And you can avoid the issues if you leave the personal jabs. Things like you never, always and never are these absolutes that just tick everyone off. First of all, leader, if you're saying to someone you're always late, or you always miss a deadline, or you're never on time, if you're saying that, you as a leader have already failed, because there should never have been an always. The first 1 or 2 times should have been addressed. And that is the reason why honesty is kindness. Okay? Honesty is kindness, but leave the personal jabs out of it. And that's how you can maintain that respect and protect that dignity. And as I said earlier, every conversation that you have, whether you're a leader or just with your family or your spouse or your kids, every conversation you have, you're making a deposit. Compliments are deposits, right? Promotions are deposits. Good conversations are deposits. But you also make withdrawals. Difficult conversations are withdrawals, right? That's a withdrawal. But the more deposits you have, the more withdrawals you can make. Okay, but if you're always doing withdrawals, you're now in a deficit in that relationship, because now you're seen as a very uber critical leader because you didn't make enough affirming deposits, right? You didn't make enough, you give enough of affirmations. I'll take one last question. But remember this, when you avoid hard conversations, your organization drifts, okay? It's going to drift. Culture will drift, because if there is an issue on your team, if there is an employee challenge on your team, you're not the only person seeing that. Most likely you actually heard about it from the grapevine or from somebody else's complaint. If that issue remains unaddressed, it's going to affect team morale eventually, right? So when you avoid the difficult conversations, your organization drifts, culture drifts. When you address them, you move the culture forward, you move the mission forward, you move the organization forward. So there's not really a downside to having these conversations. So as I'm wrapping this up, if you are a senior leader or an emerging leader looking for a healthier leadership culture, this is what I do for a living. This is my my world. So feel free to reach out to me here on this page or at Sharon Gill on my personal page, or you can go on my website, SharonGill.com, and there's multiple ways to get a hold of me there. But find the courage if you're having an issue, and let's talk. Until next time, thank you for joining us here today, and we'll see you on the next live.